All right, it's 3 p.m. Eastern, and I am Joaquin Watai, author of PTS Dog, Post Traumatic Stress Disorder, and the Service Dog. And I think this is the fourth installment of the live question and answer about PTSD service dogs. I'm going to start off with a little story. Got a message from a brother who had an experience with a service dog and wanted more information because it blew him away. Long story short, he was at a conference, had a panic attack, and another veteran service dog, he doesn't have one, picked up on it, came over to him, and started comforting him and helping him calm down during the panic attack. And he said, how does this happen? How do they train them to do this? And that's a good question. Uh, Service dogs, generally, the dogs that are chosen to be PTSD service dogs, are very empathetic animals. They pick up on your emotions, pick up on your stress, and they respond to it. The tasks come in and how they respond. You train them to do a specific task in response to your stress in order to help redirect you or get your focus on the dog rather than whatever's stressing you. And then you can, change your focus, start to calm down, and go ahead and go about the rest of your day. And what that task looks like for everybody, every individual is different because everybody's different. Everybody responds different. Everybody's dog responds different to whatever's going on in the environment that's causing the stress that could potentially turn into a trigger and create an episode. So he was blown away that this dog had picked up on his panic attack and come over to comfort him. He didn't even know this dog. It was somebody else's dog. Well, that's what they're trained to do. And more specifically, that's what a program dog is trained to do. And I say that, I'm making a difference between a program or a cooperatively or self-trained dog, because when you take the time to self-train or cooperatively train a dog, that is where you, the handler, is responsible for the dog's day-to-day care. You have the dog with you 24/7, and you go to classes with the dog. That dog is with you all the time. That dog sees all your triggers. That dog sees all the stress, sees how you behave when you start to ramp up and begin to have a panic attack or an anxiety attack or a rage attack or whatever your symptomology is. That dog experiences it real time. And so that dog begins to learn what the signs are before it happens, and the dog will then begin to you can begin to take the dog's responses, its natural responses to whatever's happening, and you can shape them into trained tasks. For example, with Skeeter, his first level of alert to me is that he sits on my foot. When he sits on my foot, I know I need to check myself out. I need to see what's going on in my head. I need to check out the conversation, who I'm talking to, what's going on around me, and see what it is that's giving me stress. And at that point, my attention's on him. When a 100-pound dog sits on your foot, first thing you do is drop your hand and start petting him. That's just an automatic response. And that starts to release endorphins and cortisol and lower dopamine levels in your brain, and it starts to calm you down. So immediately he's already taking a step to try and help me to stay calm and to not become triggered in a stress situation. That's what works for me. The next step, if it continues to escalate, is he starts pushing me away from usually the other person. Almost always it's another person. He starts pushing me away from that person. That's a trained task. I taught him to remove me from situations. And he may just push me away, or he may start acting like he needs to go potty. I've taught him to create a distraction that will enable me to remove myself from the situation rather than that situation escalating into something that could become dangerous. And that works. It works really well. Whereas a fully programmed trained dog is trained to respond after the fact. Here's a person having a panic attack. This is what a panic attack looks like. So the dog comes over and gives comfort after the person has been triggered. And that's a fundamental difference between a programmed trained dog and a self or cooperatively trained PTSD service dog. I'm speaking specifically about PTSD service dogs here. The self-trained or cooperatively trained dog has a 24/7 background of your stressors, your responses to stressors, and what happens, where you get to before that stress becomes a trigger. And that trigger, once the trigger's pulled, we all know once you pull a trigger, destruction occurs downrange. There's a set result. We want to keep from getting to that point where the trigger is pulled. That's in my mind the primary use for a PTSD service dog. Does that mean program dogs are bad or program dogs don't help? Absolutely not. But it's a fundamental difference in mindset when approaching training and working with a service dog. You have a dog that responds after the fact, or you have a dog that preempts before things get to the point of needing to respond. Which sounds more effective to you? Which is a more effective way to learn with the assistance of your dog to navigate through your day, navigate through, going shopping, going to the movies, going to the mall, what's a more effective approach than to try and learn to not necessarily avoid, but learn to be able to work through those stressors so that they no longer are allowed to become triggers, because instead of focusing on the things that are stressing you around you that can cause a trigger, you're focusing on working on handling your dog. And when you're handling your dog, you're not paying attention to the stressors unless your dog's pointing something out to you that you need to pay attention to, which again gives you an opportunity to remove yourself from the situation or plan to respond to a situation because the dog's alerting you, hey, this is stressful. You need to pay attention here. This is a stressful situation. And because your dog is alerting you and you are listening to your dog, you can plan to respond. And you can train yourself. You can train yourself to have planned responses to all kinds of situations. On any given day, when I go to the grocery store with Skeeter, I get stopped anywhere between 3 and 30 times. And I'm not exaggerating. It can be very, very frustrating. And depending on what kind of mood I'm in that day, I may be in the mood to try and help educate people and teach them about service dogs, or I may be in the mood where I want to be left alone, and I just don't want to deal with them. Well, Skeeter's taught me ways to work through that are effective, that aren't necessarily rude, and that enabled me to continue to do what I need to do to complete my mission. I'm here to buy milk, eggs, cheese, butter, and not get stopped every 3 steps because somebody wants to go, oh my God, your dog's so amazing. And so, I do things. I have a couple of coping strategies, coping mechanisms for dealing with that. One is I have the cards that I've printed that I'm still waiting on ordering that have some facts about service dogs. It says, stop. That dog you just approached is working. He's a service dog. Interfering with him can cause problems for his handler. And some education about the laws. I have a set of responses, oh my God, your husky's so gorgeous. Well, he's not a husky, he's an Alaskan Malamute, but thank you. Anybody who owns a husky knows that a Malamute stands about 6 inches taller and weighs about 30 pounds more. Just things like that. You can almost look at a person who's approaching you because you have a dog and know what they're going to say just by the way they're dressed and the type of person they are. It's kind of silly. I had a Malamute once. Yeah, okay, Great. I have one now, and we're trying to go do our grocery shopping. Thank you. Have a nice day. But you learn working with your dog that you can deal with all this stress. There's not anything anybody can throw at you that you're not able to deal with because you have the strength, that quiet strength of your service dog by your side supporting you. And it allows you to continue to function. Uh, this leads me to my next topic. And I want to talk a little bit about PTSD, and I want to talk about everybody's favorite, the VA and PTSD. Hey, Travis, how you doing? And I want to talk about the VA's program to provide service dogs for veterans with PTSD. The VA does have a program. It's a very limited program. It comes through the orthotics department, or not orthotics, the guys that make artificial legs and stuff. It's not orthotics. I'm blocking on what that word is, but that's the department that does it. And the policy states that the disability has to cause mobility impairment for the PTSD sufferer. Now, hey Doc, how is this is a real nebulous area. It has to cause mobility issues for the PTSD sufferer. One symptom, if you want to call it that, of PTSD is agoraphobia, a fear of going out into public, out in large open places, or out where people are. So I guess you could consider that to be a mobility issue, because if you're afraid to go out to those places like the store to buy groceries, that's a major life activity that is then affected. You can no longer perform because you have panic attacks or whatever your symptomology is. I guess that those pieces of the puzzle add together and fit as far as the VA's really tightly worded framework for what is required of your disability in order to provide you a service dog. And I think that's wrong. I think that the way that the VA approaches it, it's wrong. And here's why. I went through all the VA treatments. I was hospitalized for 23 days. They put me on a lot of medication. I was on the zombie cocktail. I did cognitive therapy. I did EMDR. I did group therapy. I did prolonged exposure therapy. Everything they threw at me, I tried. I still had nightmares. I still had flashbacks. I still had panic attacks and rage attacks. Nothing they threw at me helped me. And all the drugs did was turn me into a zombie. The last ditch effort, the last choice I had was to try training a service dog and using a service dog. That saved my life. All the drugs, they didn't do anything. And half of them, part of the side effects was suicidal ideation. So if you're already suicidal and you're taking a drug that makes you suicidal, you're fighting an uphill battle. With Skeeter by my side, I was able to stop taking all the zombie drugs. I was on 11 different medications. It was either 8 or 11. I think it was 11. 30-some pills a day. I mean, it was crazy. I actually had to put a program on my phone, an app on my phone, to tell me at what time to take what meds in order to keep track of it. I now take 2 psychologically related medications. One's a very mild anti-anxiety med, and then one's helps with preventing nightmares when I sleep. 5 pills a day instead of 30-some. Why? Because I've learned to be able to function, to cope, to work through those stressful situations in order to avoid them becoming triggering situations. Why did Skeeter help? Travis says, because he grew up with me. I'm a very rare exception. I'm a very rare case. I actually bred my service dog. Skeeter grew up with me. He grew up seeing me at my very worst, picking up on what was going on internally that I wasn't necessarily aware of, and responding to it in ways that I could then shape into tasks. Um, I taught him to come stop me when I started getting angry. To this day, if I'm in a discussion and I start getting animated, Skeeter will come alert because my voice is raising, my stress level is raising, whatever. Skeeter comes and says, "Hey, what's going on?" He doesn't let me get to that point where I'm blowing up and swinging fists or whatever. He doesn't get there anymore. Why did Skeeter help? Because he's my partner. He's my teammate. He's my brother. We grew up together. Everything, played together, worked together. I mean, he's gone out and he didn't stack any wood or cut any wood, but he's gone out and spent days out cutting wood and things with me. Everything we do glued. I mean, the dog's always with me. If I'm coming over, my dog's coming over. That's just how it is. And Skeeter doesn't respond, and most dogs don't respond real well to yelling and screaming and stomping, and that's not the way you train a dog. So I had to learn to stop doing that because it would scare him, and he'd come and say, "Hey, you're scaring me, you need to stop." He'd come paw at me or push against me and try to push me away. He would respond to that in a negative manner. He was basically training me. And why did he help? Skeeter helped, I think, because he desires to help. One thing that any Malamute owner will tell you is that the Malamute breed lives and strives to please people. They really, really like to make their people happy. And he has a very strong desire to interact with people, make people happy, make me happy, because I'm his owner, his handler, his daddy. And he really, when I'm calm, he's calm. When I'm relaxed, he's relaxed. And vice versa, when I'm in an environment that's stressful for me, because I see that he's calm, I'm able to remain calm. Because I see that he's relaxed, I'm able to relax. And that's the next natural step is learning to trust your dog. It's really hard to trust your dog for a while when you're training a service dog, when you're working with a service dog and you go out into that environment, whatever that stressful environment is. You have to learn to, I don't want to say give some of the power of making decisions about what's going on in the environment around you to your dog. Let's say you have to learn to understand how your dog is responding to the environment around you, and trust that your dog's response, his body language, the way he's carrying his head, the way he's carrying his tail, trust that your dog's response is an accurate reflection of what's going on around you. Because one of the things that PTSD does, at least in my experience for me, is misinterprets environmental cues as threats. Things that aren't actually threats, but because it's a higher energy, higher level environment, I misinterpret those cues. It's the thing, you're at the Costco and the guy accidentally drops a pallet, and so it sounds like an explosion and you hit the floor. And your dog's looking at you like, that was just a pallet dropping. It's okay. But you're already in full on, fight or flight mode. Okay, where's cover? But if you look at your dog and your dog's calm and your dog's just giving you that quizzical look like, hey, it's okay, relax. You can start learning to trust your dog, learn to trust his interpretation of what's going on around you, because you have a skewed perception. You can start not having those reactions, because instead of hitting that fight or flight level, you look at your battle buddy, who's right now eyeing me like, hey, you're talking and I'm trying to sleep. You look at your battle buddy, who's calm. He's just wagging his tail, giving you that quizzical look, and you can go, oh, okay, that wasn't what it sounded like. I can relax. I can be cool. It's okay. Why did Skeeter help? That's a really good question, Travis. I can't even begin to presume to go into the mind of my dog. I can tell you what I see from my dog. And he does have a genuine desire to please, and he does have a genuine desire for dad to be happy and calm rather than dad to be raging and slamming doors and things like that. I guess has an innate knowledge of where things should be as far as how I'm where my mood is at, and he takes the time, because I've trained him to give me alerts, give me reminders that, hey, it's okay, we're cool, we're safe. And the opposite, if Skeeter growls in a situation, I know I need to get myself clear immediately. It's only happened once or twice. Once, I was at the Walmart in Pueblo, Colorado on the north end, and if anybody's ever been there, you know that's a rough joint. We just walked in, Skeeter looked to the left, growled, and shoved me back out the door. He would not let me go in. Turns out there was a guy with a gun robbing the bank right there. He pulled me out of that situation before anything could have occurred. He saw that it was dangerous. He picked up on the stress in the environment, the fear of the teller, the anxiety of the robber, and he said, nope, not going there, and he made me leave. That's an extreme example, but I listen to my dog's environmental cues. If he says don't go down this aisle, I don't go down that aisle. My dog knows better than I do. He's got better perception of people than I have. All right, so let's talk about how to get a service dog, because that's probably the number one question I get on the PTS dog page. How do I get a service dog? How do I get a service dog? Well, you can go out and buy one if you've got 35 grand. There are a lot of organizations out there, probably in the hundreds across the United States, that sell fully trained PTSD service dogs. I've put it out before. I'll put it out again. I understand that there is a time and a place for program dogs. When it comes specifically to a PTSD service dog, I don't think it's the right way to go, especially because the price is ridiculous. And because the dog doesn't have the exposure to you, the handler, the continuous exposure where it knows what your stress levels are, what your stressors are, and where your trigger point is at, the dog is trained to respond after the fact. But you can do that. You can buy a dog. There are a lot of programs out there that provide dogs to disabled veterans free of charge. They're 501c3s. They do fundraising in order to provide the sticker that for some reason between $15,000 and $35,000 is the price sticker for a service dog. So that's the commitment that they look at. If you're going to go to an organization like that, and that's, like I said, there's a time and a place for program trained dogs. If that's the way you want to go, by all means, do that. If you do go to one of those organizations, I really want to encourage you to look at a couple of things. First of all, is there an obligation on the part of the disabled veteran to do fundraising? Some of these organizations make the veterans jump through hoops, go stand on stages, and do all kinds of things until they raise $15,000. And I'm pulling that. I've seen that number on an organization's page, so I'm just pulling that out of the air. I would posit that if you are in need of a PTSD service dog, you may not be in the best frame of mind to be able to do something like go stand on a stage and talk to 3,000 people at a fundraiser. Any program that asks you to step outside of your comfort zone or leap outside your comfort zone into something absolutely terrifying, I would urge you to use caution with. Another thing you need to look at is what the program's requirements are. A lot of the programs, you have to get a letter from a medical professional recommending a service dog. Some of the programs, you just need a confirmation that you are a disabled veteran. Your VA letter of compensation works fine. You need to look at what they're looking for. Every 501c3 has their financials online. That's part of the law. They're supposed to list where the money goes. Go look at where the money goes. Are you really getting a dog from an organization that turns around and puts everything back into the veterans, or not? Look at this about the organization. What is the organization's end goal? Is it to help veterans, or is it to look good because they help veterans? These are the questions that you should look at and ask yourself. The next way, two ways, because they kind of are hand in hand to get a PTSD service dog, is through a cooperative training program where you have the dog, you own the dog is with you 24/7, and you take the dog to training 1, 2, 3 times a week, however the program works, for as long as it takes to get the dog fully trained, or self-training, where again you own the dog, you are responsible for the dog 24/7, and you train the dog in its basic obedience, train it for public access, train it to perform tasks specifically designed to help assist you with your disability. Both of those ways, if you're able to self-train, do it. I can't recommend it highly enough for a PTSD service dog. If you could train your dog yourself, do it. If you need help, cooperative training is the way to go. What you essentially learn when you cooperatively train what you essentially learn when you take your dog to a trainer to learn to train your service dog is how to train a dog. And once you've done it, you can do it again. But that's not the point of cooperatively training or self-training your service dog. And this is where people, this is what I'm trying to find a way to share with people. When you undertake the process of training your dog, you yourself are learning. You yourself are growing. You yourself are finding a way to heal. Because you have to go through some very intense self-evaluation in order to understand. When I go into this situation, I start getting stressed out, and all of a sudden, bam, I'm having a panic attack, and I got to leave. Or whatever. You have to figure out what things are causing you to have these reactions, and then as you're processing that, you have to figure out how to train your dog to help you work through it. Not necessarily avoid it. This is not about avoiding situations. You can't avoid grocery shopping. You got to eat sometime. Okay, but this is learning how to work through the stressors, not allowing them to become triggers, so that you can successfully complete the mission at hand to buy groceries at the Walmart. This process helps engender personal growth. It gives you strength. It teaches you new coping mechanisms, ways to deal with the crazy stuff that's going on in your head that you can't control. It gives you new ways to understand it so that you can work around it and work through it. It's hard. Training your service dog is not an easy task. And when you go into a cooperative training environment where you're working with a trainer, you've got to discuss things with your trainer. You've got to say to your trainer, well, when I go to the grocery store, this is what happens. This is why I think it happens. How can we teach the dog to do something to help me to avoid this happening? And so you've got to be able to start to open up and talk about it. You don't necessarily have to talk about what happened, what your experiences were that produced PTSD. Okay, but what you do have to talk about is, this is what's going on in my head right now in this situation. I would like to learn how to be able to work through that to avoid triggers. Ultimately, we are avoiding being triggered by dealing with stressors. So we need to use the dog to help do that, because that little part of our brain that used to give us that filter system and detach the fight or flight from perception rather than directly run us through it, it doesn't work anymore. It's short-circuited. It's hardwired. You see it, you hear it, it immediately goes fight or flight. The dog becomes the prosthetic. Prosthetics department, that's what it is. The dog becomes the prosthetic that assists in providing that filter that your brain no longer produces for you. So Travis says, Skeeter helped by relationship, trust, and empowerment. And that was enough to replace medication. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what does the medication do? The medication doesn't teach you how to deal with situations. The medication just dumbs you down so you don't have to. The medication zombifies you so you're not even necessarily perceiving situations. Some of the medications key you up so that you're over-perceiving situations. I was on one medication for about a month before I convinced my doctor I had to get off of it, that essentially I was always jittery. I was always on edge. I was extremely hypervigilant. And it was the meds that were supposed to be helping not make that happen, that were instead increasing the effect. And yes, Travis, it was enough to replace medication because it wasn't replacing the medication. What it did was, working with Skeeter, precluded the need to numb my brain, precluded the need to zombify me, so that I was just kind of gliding through mindlessly through situations instead of just being and existing and not caring. I was able to begin perceiving and responding and interacting again. And Skeeter gave that to me through relationship that I built with him, the mutual trust we have. He trusts me as his handler, that I'm not going to get him into situations where he's going to be harmed or in danger. I trust him that he's going to do the exact same thing for me. He's going to help me avoid harmful situations and danger. And empowerment, because Skeeter gives me that perception. He's essentially a perceptual prosthetic that allows me to interpret the world around me through his eyes, because my interpretation may not be accurate, but his is. And I have faith in his interpretation. He's empowered me to be able to go out, to be able to do this, to be able to talk to perfect strangers on the internet about the subject, to be able to write a book, to be able to cross the country 5 times I've done now, to interview veterans, strangers. Skeeter's given me that ability. He has given me that empower. Yes, Joe, I would say that it treats the cause, doesn't just control the symptoms. And that's the difference. That's why a service dog, I find, is such a more effective treatment for PTSD than drugs. Because the service dog treats the cause, as Travis has put it, the service dog treats the veteran. It allows the veteran to grow and change, where the drugs just treat the symptoms, and they're primarily aimed at numbing the symptoms. Because if you're a mindless zombie, you're no problem. And we won't get into the politics of the VA and how they prefer us to be zombies. We won't go there. But let's just say I think that's the source of a lot of the pushback from the VA against service dogs, is because it does empower veterans instead of controlling veterans. And there's a difference, and the drugs are control mechanism. They control the veterans, whereas a dog empowers a veteran. Again, part of that empowerment is learning how to work through situations, how to deal with situations, rather than just avoiding them because you're not even perceiving that there's a situation there. If you're quiet and numb, then you're easily controlled. And but again, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole because that's a rabbit hole. No, that's a good question, Travis, and I am not a psychologist. Travis asks, how are you going to prove that service animals are more productive towards a treatment plan than a medication approach? Right now, all we have is anecdotal evidence. I'm not a scientist, I'm an author. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm a writer. I can give you hundreds of first-person stories from the people who live it, who say that the service dog helped them get off the medication, that the service dog has helped them more than anything that the VA threw at them. but the VA, science in general, psychology is, as you well know, they don't consider anecdotal evidence as evidence. They want empirical evidence. So I don't know. I can give you anecdotal evidence all day long. I can put out a survey on the internet right now and get hundreds of responses from veterans saying the service dog helped me. Susan, I'll get to Brian Blair and Susan Pilling. I will get to your questions in just a second. So Travis, I think first and foremost, we need to find a psychologist or a psychiatrist who is willing to develop an empirical investigation into it. I think that, and I think there is one. Somebody's contacted me saying, "Hey, I have information. The psychiatrist that's working for the VA that's working on a study about PTSD service dog." I think there are a few people who are starting to turn around. Peer-to-peer structure, absolutely, Travis. I think that in the meantime, one of the most powerful things we can do as handlers and veterans is reach out to our fellow veterans and work with them and help them, teach them. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do is share education, support, information to other veterans in order to empower them to work with a PTSD service dog and get off the zombie meds. Peer-to-peer structure is absolutely, I agree, it's absolutely 100% a good thing to do. Talk to your local VA if you're able to train dogs, if you have dog training experience. See if the VA will let you train dogs at the VA for veterans. Work with other vets. Do a once-a-week vet class or whatever. We're going to have to attack this VA issue with service dogs from a grassroots level as well as from a top-down level. I'm working on a plan to attack the top-down level, and I'm in contact with some other people who are more experienced and more connected in Washington and are doing the same. But from a grassroots level, if we as service dog handlers and veterans want to reach out to and empower our fellow veterans by having, service dog coffee group Tuesday mornings from 10 to 11, we can maybe start building that up from the bottom up as a grassroots effort. Peer-to-peer is absolutely essential. And of course, Travis, I know where you're going with this. That begins to build a structure. That begins to build the support that we need as we work together and spend time together, where as the Colonel so aptly put it, your mission is sitting right next to you, where we start to take care of one another and bear each other's burdens, and we begin to rebuild that brotherhood that we had when we were in the service. Okay, Susan, need to know where to submit for a service dog. You've got to start with your psychologist or your psychiatrist. Have the discussion with them. If the VA will provide you a service dog, the service dog comes from the prosthetics department. And there's a whole process. I have the link to the VA's policy document. I will put it in the files of the PTS Dog group page after this, so that you can read it. You have to jump through a lot of hoops. It's as with all things VA, it's very complicated. There are a couple of people, I want to say, in the PTS Dog group who have successfully navigated that process. I have bad memory problems, so you'll have to forgive me, but I think there was one or two who mentioned that they had done it, that they had their dog through the prosthesis department. Now, again, one of the drawbacks to using the prosthesis department at the VA is that they will only provide program dogs that are certified by ADI. And those dogs are trained by a third party who is not you, who does not have PTSD. And so there are those are the dogs that are trained to respond after the fact. Not necessarily a bad thing, but not the process that provides healing. Prosthetics department, you talk to your psychologist, your psychiatrist first. You start there. And again, I'll post the VA policy in the files folder in the PTS dog group. If you have not joined PTS dog group, please ask to join. It's open to anybody, but because of the way Facebook is, you have to ask to join. I haven't disincluded anybody yet. Okay, Brian. How well does the VA provide access with service dogs? It depends on the VA. The VA's policy is published in 2015 in the Federal Record, is that they will parallel applicable federal law, in other words, the ADA. However, the VA does not fall under the ADA. And unfortunately, although the national policy is published in the Federal Record by what I'll call DC, Central VA and DC, the governing body, says that they will adhere to the ADA, local directors can make whatever rules they want still. There is no consistency from VA to VA. There are ways to deal with that if you are having issues. The best advice I can give you is if you use a service dog and you're going to the VA, Susan, I will put the policy in the files folder, and you can print out the policy. It's the VA's own policy, and you can take it to them. Okay, back to Brian. You can do the same thing. You can print out the VA's published policy saying that they will parallel or adhere to the ADA, the applicable federal law, and you can go sit down with the director and ask him, give him specific examples. When I go here, I can't take my service dog because X, Y, and Z. That violates the ADA and the intent of the federal law because. If you need help doing that, contact the page. Me or one of my admins will gladly work through that with you and help you develop discussion points to take to the director. Some places, it's no problem. On the other hand, your dog has to be behaved, period, or you will be asked to remove it. The VA is very leery of service dogs, and it's veterans' own fault because we have veterans still to this day taking pets and ESAs and untrained animals into the VA. That still happens to this day. It's our own fault. Unfortunately, we have people in our own community and the veteran community who take advantage of what are perceived as vagueness in the law to take a pet into the VA claiming it's a service dog. That's something we have to police within our own community. That's part of it, and that's done by education because it's either education or being escorted out in cuffs by the VA police. Brian, what was your follow-up question? Dave Blanke, check out tadsaw.org. They have trainers throughout the country. If there's a trainer local to you, they will help you out. And you are not a second-class veteran. Okay, I answered in the follow-up. Thank you, Brian. You are not a second-class veteran, Dave. We all signed on the dotted line. We all promised to pay the United States of America some of, up to and including our lives. We wrote a blank check. If you served with honor and was discharged with honor, you are not a second-class veteran. Don't think of yourself that way. Don't fall into that mindset. Not just combat vets get PTSD. Not just veterans get PTSD. Human beings get PTSD. It's part of the human condition. It's the way that the human mind helps deal with traumatic situations in order to allow you to survive. We need to stop regimenting ourselves. I'm more vet than you. I'm more hurt than you. I'm more whatever than you. That's all baloney. We all are who we are as individuals, but we all offered to make the same sacrifice for our country. Period. End of discussion. Okay, so Travis asked what the requirement is to start training your own dog. What paperwork do you need to be federally protected? Well, if the town you live in requires dog registration to prove that your dog has its shots, that's what paperwork you need. There is no federal registration. There is no federal certification. It does not exist. And anybody who tells you otherwise is grossly miseducated. What you need to start training your own dog is first a dog. I highly suggest starting with a puppy. Don't go find a breed you want. That's not what you need. Okay, you have to find the dog, the individual animal, that you need. You need to find a dog that's got a lot of empathy. You need to find a dog that's very focused and calm. And we're talking the puppy stage here. You need to find a puppy that wants to please you. You need to find a puppy that you connect with. If you have some mobility issues, on top of the fun of PTSD, I broke my back while I was on active duty. So I do have mobility issues. So I need a large breed dog in order to assist me with some of the mobility. That's the only kind of breed considerations you need to make, is do you need mobility assistance? If you do, you need a dog big enough to help you. But, if you're looking for strictly a PTSD service dog, you may go to the pound and find a 12-week-old puppy sitting in the corner that, for whatever reason, you just connect with. Brian, we'll get to that. Okay. That's what you need first and foremost, is an empathetic dog that you are able to connect with, a dog that's calm and focused. And then you need to start training your dog. And the first thing you need to worry about, and I'm gonna make some people mad right now, but I'm gonna tell you right now, nobody in their right mind is ever going to consider, if it comes down to a court of law, any dog under 18 months to 2 years old as a trained service dog. I'm sorry, but puppies are not trained service dogs. They're puppies that you are training. And I feel very strongly about that. I didn't start working task training with Skeeter until he was 18 months old and already had been trained to behave in public. He'd gone through canine good citizenship training and socialized really well and worked with as far as reactivity and stuff. That's where you start. First of all, take them to puppy classes. Go get that out of the way. Teach them to be potty trained. Teach them that they do not go inside under any circumstance. Teach them to go outside. Here are the federal requirements. A service dog must be trained to perform tasks that help or assist their disabled handler to alleviate symptoms or to perform tasks that the handler would otherwise be unable to perform without the assistance of the dog. Specific trained tasks. The second requirement is that the service dog must be thoroughly housebroken. It does not go potty indoors. The third requirement of federal law is that the dog is under the handler's control at all times, or if the dog is not under the handler's control, that the handler is taking the appropriate steps to regain control immediately. That's federal law. I will put the link in into the comments here in just a second. Don't take my word for it. Read it for yourself. Tasks depends on the person, Travis. That's up to you. That's like we were talking about earlier. When you train your dog, you have to figure out what tasks you need the dog to perform. What is it that the dog can do to you or for you that will assist you in avoiding a panic attack, in preventing that will prevent a panic attack? Okay, what is it that the dog can do? You have to figure that out for yourself. There are some standard tasks. One of the greatest tasks a dog can perform is something that has been empirically proven to have a positive effect on the brain. It's called deep pressure therapy. That's where the dog puts its weight some or all of its weight, depending on the size of the dog, on your midriff and your waist area, and lays there and provides pressure. This is similar to the weighted vest or weighted blanket. It lowers dopamine levels, increases serotonin and endorphins. The dog's mere presence being comforting is not a task, Joe. That is an emotional support animal. That just says, I feel better when my dog's here. That's an emotional support animal. Emotional support animals are not allowed access to places dogs can't go, like service dogs are by the ADA. They are not protected. And by the way, the dog is not who is protected by the ADA. The disabled person who is handling the dog is who is protected by the ADA. Brian, I gave you the standard. The dog is task trained. The dog is under control, and the dog is housebroken. If you go into a business and they ask if it is a service dog, let me read it from the law to you. In situations where it is not obvious that the dog is a service animal, that's important. If your dog is vested and behaving, there's no reason for staff in a business to ask you if it's a service dog. Okay? Right there, they're violating the law. In situations where it is not obvious that the dog is a service animal, staff may ask only two specific questions. Is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? Not what is your disability? And two, what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? Staff are not allowed to request any documentation for the dog, require that the dog demonstrate its task, or inquire about the nature of the person's disability. That's it. That's federal law. Amanda Tamlingson, good question. The ADA does not have a stance on service dogs and protection training. However, the Department of Justice does. And the position of the Department of Justice is that a service dog cannot be protection trained. Here's why. Say you have a seizure alert dog. You have a seizure. The dog's there, putting its body under your head or whatever task you've trained it to do when you have a seizure. And the EMTs arrive to try to provide assistance, but the dog's protection trained, so it attacks the EMTs. Where are you then? Service dogs cannot be protection trained. It is not appropriate because the service dog functions as a piece of medical equipment. That service dog is there to assist you in overcoming your disability by performing physical tasks that you would otherwise be unable to perform. If you have its protection trained, you are then creating a situation where the dog may be forced to be taken away or even put down because it is preventing medical assistance from getting to you. I have the link to the DOJ policy. I'll put that into the files section on the PTS dog group in the files and information. I know they have that link somewhere. I cannot pull it up immediately. But the position, the official Department of Justice position on protection training service dogs is that you cannot do so. However, and this goes back to the ADA rules, if the dog is provoked and protects itself or you, that is not protection training, and that is not a violation of the laws. No, blocking is not considered protection training. Blocking is a task that you can train the dog to perform. Skeeter does it for me, where the dog interposes its body between you and other people in order to create personal space that you would otherwise be unable to create unless you started shoving people. We don't want to go there. Then we get into breaking the law. But the dog intervening by putting its body in between you and other people, which is a task called blocking, is absolutely valid in my opinion, and provides that physical barrier you are unable to provide. That is not protection. The dog is not growling. The dog is not attacking. The dog is simply creating a physical buffer between you and other people. That is not protection training. However, if you teach the dog to bite somebody who gets too close, that is protection training. That is prohibited. Let's see. What was I talking about? Oh, goodness, I've lost track. I've lost track. Hang on a second. Let's go over this real quick. In the link to the document from the ADA that I provided you, which, by the way, is the government's interpretation of the service dog section of the Americans with Disabilities Act, is considered the law. This is something I posted on the page earlier this week and created a little bit of controversy. Service animals can be any breed of dog. The ADA does not restrict the type of dog breeds that can be service animals. That is a direct quote. That created a little bit of an argument. I disagreed because he's never seen a Chihuahua perform train tests. That's neither here nor there. I'm not going to give opinions on breeds of dogs. I can tell you what my experience with certain breeds are. I'm telling you what the law says, which is that there is no breed restriction. So when I walk in with an Alaskan Malamute, no law says I cannot. There is no breed restriction. If I walked in with a Chihuahua, as long as it was trained to perform tasks to assist with my disability, it's legal. Doctor's note for Travis, are you talking about with organizations, with training organizations? The doctor's note is for training organization is a little different than a request for accommodation, which is a completely different subject. Needs to state that you are disabled and that it is recommended that you use a service dog as part of your treatment plan. That's it. Doesn't have to say what your disability is. Doesn't have to say what the dog is supposed to be trained to do. Because I'm going to tell you right now, especially with a PTSD service dog, your psychiatrist or psychologist might be able to say, well, these are areas where you need to work on. But unless they're a dog trainer themselves, they can't tell you need to train the dog to do this, this, and this. That's not within the realm of purview of their knowledge. They just need to say you need to train the dog to assist in these areas. This is what you need to focus on. And then you go work with the dog and work through that. It is not a prescription per se, unless you're going through the VA and getting a service dog through the prosthetics department. That's a completely different and independent process from the rest of the world. You do not have to have a prescription to have a service dog. If you are disabled, you have the right to choose to use a service dog as part of your treatment. That's the law. You do not have to have a prescription. However, when you're dealing with things like housing or flying, you do have to have a letter of accommodation. Letter of accommodation needs to be from a medical professional, and all it needs to say is you are disabled and that you use a service dog as part of your treatment. It does not need to go into your disabilities. It does not need to go into the dog's tasks. None of that. It only has to say you're disabled and the dog is part of your treatment. You're not violating HIPAA. And I have a problem with the VA because just in case I needed it for housing purposes, I requested an accommodation letter from the VA. And the licensed social worker who is part of the VA's mental health program is who wrote it, laid out my diagnoses, said these are my disabilities. That's inappropriate information, does not need to be conveyed to a landlord unless you need them to put in a ramp for a wheelchair or something like that. It's none of their business what your disability is. It's none of anybody's business. That's your business. That's why we have a law called the HIPAA law, which is the Healthcare Information Portability and Protection Act, is to protect that information. You do not have to have a prescription to have a service dog. You do have to be disabled to have a service dog. If you have not been diagnosed or determined to be disabled, then it's not a service dog. All right, we've been at this for about an hour. Does anybody have any final questions before we wrap it up? Anybody? I want to let you know real quick. Hang on, let me get to the link. finished the pre-sale, the pre-order sale of T-shirts through my DV store for fundraising, and I don't have final numbers or anything on that. However, the GoFundMe campaign is still ongoing. I'm still trying to raise the funds in order to get the book published. I am trying to grab the link and put it up in the chat now, if I can find it. Give me a second. We've raised $900 on the GoFundMe so far. That is a big help. However, it is not enough. We're still working on it. So once again, the T-shirt sale is over. The GoFundMe is still ongoing, and we're getting there. My goal is to have the book professionally edited. I'm hoping to be able to afford professional layout assistance, and good grief, and then professionally publish the book. There are several options, several venues I'm investigating as far as publication is concerned. One that's looking like a pretty good option is to go through Amazon's CreateSpace and publish it on demand. I have not made up my mind 100% that's the route we're going to go. I am also going to, there's the link. I am also going to paste. I'm also going to be, yeah, Hoppy, I'm sorry, bro, you're an hour late. I'm also going to I completely lost my train of thought. We're still doing a GoFundMe. We're still raising funds. Going to get it professionally edited. This book is going to come out in paperback, but it is going to be a professional production. This is not it's not a pamphlet. It's not, a picture book, although there are going to be a lot of pictures of handlers and their dogs in there. This book is full of facts. It is full of references to the law, actual experts from the law, as well as a bunch of other information and stories from veterans who use service dogs. Link to the non-combat dog group. Do you mean the PTS dog group, Dave? It's Facebook. Hang on just a second. I'll find it for you. It's facebook.com /PTS dog group, I think. If you go on the left side of the PTS dog page, underneath the picture, there's a thing that says group, and it takes you to the PTS dog group. And I will also drop the link in here. Again, anybody is welcome. Remember, not just combat veterans get PTSD, not just veterans get PTSD, humans get PTSD. This information, although this is a veteran-run page, I am a veteran. I work with veterans. I try to do my best to help veterans out. The information and the laws are universal for Americans. So all are welcome, because the law doesn't change just because you're a veteran or not. That's it. That's all I have for this week. Travis, Stickvet Landchild, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you poking me in the ribs with that stick. If you don't know about Stickvet, please check out facebook.com/Stickvet. Travis is building a very powerful community around the comics and working with fellow veterans and creating the mentorship and growth that veterans in this country so sorely need. And he's also helping bridge the gap between veterans and civilians. So I really, really want to highly recommend you check out Stickvet if you're not familiar. Plus, he's got Stick Dog, who is pretty cool. Stick Dog's a PTSD service dog and pretty awesome. Also, check out the DV Farm. I support that program wholeheartedly. They take the worst of the worst homeless veterans who are struggling with alcohol and drug abuse and have failed all the other programs. They give them a place to stay. They teach them a trade, and they help them get clean and sober. It is a long-term program, and they're up in Gilsum, New Hampshire. program that I also fully support and have their full support, for which I'm extremely grateful. I'm grateful to Dysfunctional Veterans for helping me with T-shirt sales. They have infrastructure that simply doesn't exist for me. And also thanks to the Disgruntled Vets. Who else? Stick Vet. I already thanked Stick Vet. I appreciate the continued support. I will continue to work to educate and empower veterans to use PTSD service dogs to assist in healing, growth, and recovery from PTSD. There's no cure, but that doesn't mean we cannot grow. Amanda, thank you very much too for 022. It's been a lot of fun working with Alex, and I hope to continue that relationship for a long time to come. Also, thank you out to tadsaw.org. If you're not familiar, if you need help training a service dog and you want to use a cooperative program, check out TADSAW, Train a Dog, Save a Warrior. I recommend them highly. Thank you very much. 2 weeks, we'll do this again. Have a good day, all.